online forum hosted by the Sun City Oro Valley Government Affairs Committee. We are recording this forum so that you and those who are unable to join us live will be able to view this later via YouTube. I'm Al Johnson, the moderator for this forum. At the end of the video, we'll be posting information about voter registration and voting for this election, with links to more information about each of the candidates. Our committee has allotted roughly 60 minutes for this forum, and our timekeeper, Earl, will be helping us stay on track with gentle reminders. Each candidate will be provided with 2 minutes for an opening statement and 2 minutes for a closing statement. The committee has crafted questions for the candidates and solicited questions for this forum from our residents. Due to time and staffing constraints, our audience will be unable to ask questions during this webinar. Both candidates will have 1.5 minutes to answer each question, and I'll alternate who will get to answer first. So at this point, I'd like to introduce the candidates and allow them to give their opening statement. So first in the spotlight, the Democratic candidate, Rex Scott.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much to all the members of the Government Affairs Committee of Sun City Vistoso for this opportunity, and thank you to Mr. Spain for participating with me. The most important thing to know about me from the get-go is that I'm a husband and father. My wife and I have been married for 26 years, and we're blessed to be the parents of 25-year-old twins who we raised in the area. They're the product of Marana schools, and we're glad that both of them are still in Pima County. I have a very soft spot in my heart for Sun City Vistoso. My in-laws were living there when my wife and I got married, and we actually had our wedding reception at the Mountain Vista Activity Center. In fact, one of my favorite wedding pictures was taken up in that tower by the Activity Center. I've devoted my entire life to public service. I spent 4.5 years as a member of 2 city commissions and as a 2-term city council member in my hometown of Athens, Ohio. For 8 years here in Pima County, I was a teacher at 2 different middle schools. And then also here in Pima County, for 19 years, I was an assistant principal or a principal at 5 different middle and high schools. I should point out that half of my career as an educator has been spent serving families within District 1. I started my teaching career at Flowing Wells Junior High. I was an assistant principal at Ironwood Ridge High School, and I was the principal at Tortolita Middle School. So I've built a great deal of trust, rapport, and strong relationships with the families in District 1, and I hope to continue my service to them as their next county supervisor. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
And now the spotlight turns to the Republican candidate, Steve Spain.
Good afternoon. Many thanks to the Sun City Oro Valley Government Affairs Committee for hosting today's event. I am Steve Spain, and I'm very proud to be running for Pima County Supervisor here in District 1. I got into this race about a year ago because I believe Pima County can do better. Pima County deserves better. We, the neighbors in Pima County, deserve better than what we get from county government. Many of you have probably recently received your new property tax statements that show an increase. For those of you who are renters, you're probably going to see your rent go up for the same reason. And that really has been the consistent pattern here in Pima County. And yet, as one example, for 20 years, the Pima County budget didn't even include a line item for road maintenance. It's waste, it's malfeasance that has prevented us from doing better. But we can reach that goal of doing better if we just take some simple steps, like cleaning up the unfilled positions perennially in the county budget, or spending the gas tax money on the roads where it belongs, or not throwing money at the pie in the sky crony deals that typify Pima County politics. Now, if we focus on those fundamentals, I honestly believe We will recover from this pandemic swiftly but safely to come back stronger than we were before. We will do better here in Pima County. And I put my experience, my time on the leadership team for Starwood Hotels and then Marriott to your disposal. I bring a very analytical process, but thoughtful process to the decisions I make. I make creative but decisive decisions because I want to do as much as we can with the resources we have. That has always characterized my work. That's what I offer to all of Pima County. By the end of this hour, I believe you will see a clear difference between my opponent and myself. I hope that you too will want to vote Steve Spain. And again, I thank you for spending this hour with us.
Thank you, gentlemen, for our opening. So let's get on to the questions, and we're going to start. Rex, you get it first. In what specific situations do you believe it is appropriate to issue bonds or increase taxes?
Well, the county is going to have all of its bonded indebtedness paid off by 2028, 2029, that fiscal year. The Board of Supervisors back in November unanimously voted to put in place the PAYGO program, which will spend $152 million of both local and state funds over 10 years to not only bring our poor and failed roads up to par, but to deal with other capital improvements. Because of the impact on state shared revenues by the pandemic, the policy allows, the policy that was passed by the board allows for certificates of participation, which is short-term debt, to be used to fund the program, and that's going to be done for the next 2 fiscal years. Again, that was approved within the policy. In terms of taxes, the Arizona Constitution says that the only way that a county can have a sales tax is by a unanimous vote of the Board of Supervisors. We are the only one of the 15 counties that does not have a sales tax. I would not be in favor of one because I think that the sales tax is regressive. There are other municipalities that rely on it. Moreover, I think it's undemocratic for that to be responsibility for just 5 people.
Steve, same question. What specific situations do you believe is appropriate to issue bonds or increase taxes?
Well, certainly not the situation we're in now. With this pandemic, with all of us having to tighten our belts, with so many businesses and the people who work at those businesses so gravely impacted, the appropriate thing for the county to have done for this year's budget would have been to have tightened its belt and eased the burden it places on all of us, and it didn't. If the county were spending money responsibly, spending those tax revenues wisely, if the county didn't have 70% of its roads in poor or failed condition, and then actually had a legitimate need to increase taxes, I might be able to get on board. We're not in that kind of a position now. I can promise you, I will be your guaranteed no vote on a sales tax increase. And I do have one little concern about what Mr. Scott says about the sales tax. The RTA is funded through a sales tax. It's a separate taxing authority. That's how it skirts that unanimous requirement. But he's in favor of increasing that by double. I'm not. I think we need to do better with the funds we already have instead of trying to seek more funds into the future.
Okay, and as kind of a follow-up to expand on the issue of revenue and taxes, we'll start with you, Steve. Do you think that the current revenue mechanisms in the county are appropriate? Why not? What changes would you propose?
As I'd said, I will be your guaranteed no vote on a sales tax. I do not believe that we need one. I think we need to look very closely at what's actually happening with the budget. Yes, there's some concern that some of the state shared revenue will fall off due to the pandemic. And yet a few months ago, when the county set its budget for the next fiscal year, they increased the budget by over $100 million, far offsetting whatever we may not get this year from the state. No, I don't think we need to increase the funding at all. Jog me through that question one more time. I want to make sure I get the answer correct for you.
What do you think about the current revenue mechanisms used in the county, and what changes would you propose?
Really, the change comes down to we should back off the burden that we're placing on everyone who lives here in Pima County. We don't need to pass a sales tax to fund the county's programs. We have enough funding there. Again, I mentioned the unfilled positions sitting on the budget year after year after year. There are so many opportunities for us to improve upon the services the county should deliver with the existing funding and find ways to back off on the tax rate. We've got the highest primary property tax rate in the state of Arizona, and we don't get value for it.
And Rex, follow up, final comments on the topic.
Well, just to be clear, the main reason that the budget was increased is because we had to appropriate the funds for from the Federal CARES Act, and also the funds from the certificates of participation to keep our roads program going. That's the main reason for the budget increase. The state shared revenues, according to the budget that was passed by the county, could go down by as much as $25 million. Could be even more than that. And property taxes, the 4 property taxes that the board sets, provide for less than 40% of general fund costs. The rest of that comes from various fees, but mostly from state shared revenues. I'd also point out that we spend close to $90 million next year on state budget transfers that the majority party in the legislature has foisted on the counties, mostly on Pima and Maricopa counties, because they can't keep their own fiscal house in order. $90 million that is borne by the taxpayers of Pima County because of the lack of leadership in Phoenix.
And one final question, and we'll start with you, Rex, as we talk about budget and expenditures. The pandemic will certainly have an impact on the budget. The budget was set prior to the pandemic. How will you approach the inevitable reallocation and adjusting of the budget? Rex, your first.
Well, one of the levels of experience that I can offer to the residents of District 1 is I've got 23 years of experience dealing with public sector budgets as a former elected official and as a school administrator. The primary impact on the budget is going to be on state shared revenues. And as we discussed in our previous forum, that's kind of a moving target. The estimate is a $25 million loss from our sales tax shared revenues, and about half of that from the vehicle license tax and highway user, other highway user revenue funds that we get. The county is going to have to make sure that public health and safety remain our priorities, regardless of the impact on the budget. And that will be my commitment to the people of District 1 and all the people of Pima County.
And Steve, how would you deal with changes resulting from the pandemic?
So let's just clarify one little point from the question here, and that is that the current fiscal year's budget was passed during the pandemic. The county increased its budget with an increase in property tax rates during the course of the pandemic. They made that vote in June to go into effect in July. So that concept that we had to increase the overall budget numbers because of the CARES Act funds doesn't quite stand up. That's not true. The reality is the county voted to increase our property taxes, even though we did receive those federal funds that we committed and spent last year. I don't buy the reason that Chuck gave for trying to bake that into the 2020/2021 budget. I think that was wrong. I don't think we should have done that. So in answer to the question, again, take me through the question one more time. I want to make sure I get you a satisfactory answer.
What would you do to adjust the budget and the shortfalls that the county will probably experience as a result of the pandemic?
Thank you for that. So again, I disagree with the fundamental premise here that the county is going to run into a shortfall. I can't tell you how many phone calls I've received, how many emails I've received from people complaining about the fact that their property taxes have gone up again and we're still not getting new value. The key is to cut the waste and figure out how to scale back the budget. That's my approach.
Okay, Steve, now you're up for our next question. And what are your prioritized infrastructure changes the county needs to provide for future generations?
Roads are the big one, especially as I've knocked doors in Sun City. I would ask everybody I talk to, what are your top priorities for Pima County? And 97, 98, 99 times out of 100, this isn't hyperbole, this is really the way it worked, roads and taxes, in that order. I mean, it's uncanny how often that's what's on people's minds. Obviously, we've got to start working on our roads. Again, 70% of the roads here in Pima County are in poor or failed condition. Spoken with an HOA who has county maintained roads, who has an aging population that no longer feel it's safe to go walking through their neighborhood to take a daily constitutional, simply because they can't safely walk without tripping and falling. That's inexcusable. So roads are high on that priority list. Another thing that the county's done that bugs me is the county tries to use wastewater to control growth within, say, Marana, for example, other incorporated areas. The county needs to stop doing that. The county needs to fill the needs of its constituents, not try to control its constituents. So definitely roads are up there. I want to make sure that our wastewater infrastructure keeps up. And if there are ways for the county to influence building out fiber access to internet, probably worth looking into as well.
And Rex, what would be your priorities of infrastructure's changes to provide for future generations?
Well, first thing I'd like to say is that this is the second forum where I've heard words like waste and corruption without any details to back them up. And I'm hoping that those details are forthcoming at some point from my opponent. Obviously, when 70% of the roads in Pima County are in poor or failed condition, and the responsibility of the county is for the roads in unincorporated areas, and most of those unincorporated areas are within District 1, that has to be our highest infrastructure priority. As I said, the PAYGO program was passed unanimously. How often do you get a unanimous vote from the Board of Supervisors? It's a 10-year plan that commits $152 million, not just for roads, but for all of our capital improvement work during that time. We are the only county in the state that operates an urban park system. In fact, if unincorporated Pima County were a city, it would be the 4th biggest city in Arizona. So another high priority for me is going to be ensuring that our parks are always attractive and well maintained. The library district, there's a secondary tax that funds the library district. There are improvements to several of the libraries that are part of the PAYGO program. That would be another high priority for me.
Okay, and while you've got the mic, Rex, what is your view on the balance between tourist revenue versus residential growth as tools for stimulating the county's economy?
Well, you need to keep in mind that the main reason that Pima County is a tourist destination is because of our beautiful desert environment. And in our last forum together, Mr. Spain indicated that he was opposed to the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan, which has been in existence for over 20 years and has been supported by supervisors of both parties. So one of the things that I'm going to do is going to be a strong vote in favor of continuing that plan. I think that you always want to try and enhance the revenue that you get from visitors, but when you are doing that, you have to be mindful of the fact that the main source of revenue from visitors is the sales tax. And again, the sales tax is regressive and it's relied upon by other municipalities within the county. So again, that's why I would never be the 5th vote for a county sales tax. As far as the imposition of taxes on residents, I think we have to lobby hard to get more of the state shared revenues. The highway user revenue funds for counties are distributed in a way that's inequitable to Pima County. We get less than Maricopa County, even though we have more residents in unincorporated our unincorporated areas than Maricopa County does.
Steve, I'll repeat the question. What is your view on the balance between tourist revenue versus residential growth as tools for stimulating the county's economy?
One of the first things I want to point out is that Pima County does not have a record of successfully picking winners and losers when it tries to back a certain industry or business. Pima County has a record of picking losers and losers. And to Mr. Scott's comment about the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan, that has become a tool for the county administrator to swap land to benefit cronies of his. That's my problem with that. I'm very proud to live in a community that is 80% a natural preserve and will not ever be built out, apart from the 3 or 4 lots that haven't yet been built, beyond where it is. I love our desert. I want to protect our desert. I grew up in the hospitality industry in my career, and so much of that is because of the draw that this place is. But the county needs to stay out of trying to pick who wins and who loses and decide between tourism versus other businesses, decide between residential versus business. The county doesn't do that well and has a demonstrable past of failing at that. Instead, it's up to us, our neighbors, to figure out better ways. And part of the reason that the other counties do better than Pima County is because there's so little of those counties unincorporated. Pima County runs as a municipality, and that should stop. We should take that control back for ourselves and let our communities, not the county, decide.
Okay, we've kind of broached on environmental issues. So Steve, what would you do differently to protect the environment in Pima County for future generations?
Well, let's go back to the Desert Conservation Plan and the use that we've seen where you can swap little bits of land here and there to be able to prepare for other developments that might benefit cronies. That stuff's got to stop. You know, one of the things that really deeply frustrated me watching the board as closely as I have over the past few years has been this specter of I-11 coming through the Upper Valley. That would be shameful beyond anything I can imagine, destroying that pristine land in the Upper Valley to put a roadway there that doesn't serve the main populace of Pima County, that wouldn't benefit the folks who live in Tucson and further eastern reaches of the county. I think that's one of the most disastrous things we could do. I can promise you, if I-11 comes before the board while I'm serving on it, I will fight vociferously. I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that we don't put that blight through the beautiful, pristine Avra Valley. That would do more harm. Believe me, you can tell I'm a little bit passionate about that. That's one of the things I've seen kicked around the majority on the board, the Democrat majority on the board, that would be borderline criminal for what it would do to our desert. That's one of the things I would do to protect our environment very passionately.
And Rex, what would you do differently to protect the environment for future generations?
Well, it was inevitable, and I'm glad that it's on this issue, that there would be a topic where Steve and I would both be in accord. I share his opposition to the new I-11 being built through the Avra Valley. It should follow the route of I-10, not only because of the impact on the environment that Steve spoke to, but also because the majority of businesses would prefer that to happen, because they're going to lose business if I-11 is built through the Avra Valley. So regardless of which one of us wins, you're going to have an opponent to that proposal. Besides being a strong supporter of the Sonoran Desert Conservation Plan, I also think that the Department of Environmental Quality needs to be well-staffed and well-resourced so that it can not only work to deal with any violations of environmental regulations, but so that it can also form partnerships with the private sector so that more environmentally friendly standards can be used in building and retrofitting. I also would be a strong supporter of the county's Sustainable Action Plan for County Operations, which has been in effect for the last few years and sets annual goals for the county to reduce its carbon footprint.
A question that is probably on the mind of the vast majority of people who are concerned about the election this year. So Rex, you're first. Please give specific examples how you have worked or will work across party lines.
Well, this is an important question for District 1 because we're the only purple district. There are 55,000 Republicans, 52,000 Democrats, and over 40,000 independents and members of smaller parties. For my first 19 years as a registered voter, I was a Republican. And then I had a 4-year stint of being an independent, and I've been a Democrat for the last 16 years. Besides that, my background as a school leader, where you have to work with teachers and support staff personnel, and you better be someone who is willing to hear all voices and consider all points of view in that job. I believe my background as a voter, my background as an elected official, a former Republican elected official, by the way, and as a school leader will allow me to hear all voices, consider all points of view, and truly be an independent voice for this purple district.
Steve, how have you worked across party lines and would continue?
I'm very proud to say I am not a politician. This is not a career for me that I'm trying to continue. I'm coming into this from working for Starwood Hotels, as I think I alluded to earlier, and then Marriott International once Marriott bought our company. And one of the things I can tell you is we all came in with a bit of a Starwood stigma on us after that buyout. And yet I still had to lead an international team while conducting other projects, by the way, while presenting reporting directly to the C-suite, to the executives of the company. I was also working on our conversion project to bring over 18,000 end user computers, laptops and desktops from the Starwood network to the Marriott network, and had to prove to folks that didn't necessarily want to work with me that we could get along, we could work well together, and we could succeed together. Part of that, I think, comes from coming up in that hospitality industry. One of the things that we always taught was to listen generously. Isn't that a profound thought? And it's something that I've deeply internalized. It's I think, in a way, something that was already part of my personality that we just codified as I worked through Starwood and through our culture. But I listen generously. I want to hear, and have shown that as I've spoken with people, no matter their registration, throughout this process of campaigning, that I want to hear what you have to say. And I actually go back to a great example that really stands out from a couple of weeks ago, speaking with somebody who was a Democrat socialist, who very much agreed with much of what I had to say, said she was going to look me over and said she was probably going to vote for me anyway. I think I've proven that I can work with just about anybody.
If elected, one of the situations that you will be dealing with is this question. In many situations, peace officers are called upon to be psychologists and social workers. How should Pima County deal with this? Steve, the question is to you.
We ask an awful lot of our law enforcement. We ask an awful lot of these folks who go out on a day-to-day basis facing the unknown, who deserve to come home at night. For those who are doing the job honorably, yeah, you've got a bad apple or two around the country and they need to be dealt with. But for the most part, we've got very respectable folks doing a very difficult job. And you're right, they do get asked to play psychologists. They do get asked to get involved in these mental health situations. We rejected the Stone Garden funds at the beginning of this year that would have given our sheriff the opportunity to open up a new branch office in the western reaches of the county. We're not funding public safety sufficiently. Yet we have the resources to do so, and we could have accepted that grant to help do so. It is imperative that public safety remain a high priority. Where possible, that we give our law enforcement officers the training they need, but that we have the staff in the background to meet those needs, to help with those mental health situations where we shouldn't expect our peace officers to be the experts in that field, where we've got those resources, where we can put in place those resources that they can call on once they've diffused the situation, and that we can handle it for the betterment of Pima County. We've got to make sure that we fund our public safety officials correctly.
And Rex, how would you, as an elected official in Pima County, deal with this issue of being psychologists and social workers for our peace officers?
Well, this is an issue that I feel strongly about. My parents divorced when I was in high school, and my mother remarried a police officer. He's retired now, but he devoted his entire career to law enforcement. My wife and I have two nephews who are currently law enforcement officers. And during my career as a school administrator, I worked with dozens of police officers and deputies. And I'm here to tell you, as an administrator, there was never a time that they came onto a campus that they did not make the situation better. I reject the binary choice that is brought about by the phrase defund the police. I believe that we can assure that our sheriff's department has the resources that it needs to have adequate response time for the thousands of Pima County residents who live in rural areas, and so that they can deal with the crimes that they are best suited to address: violent crime, property crime, and the like. We do need to devote more resources to mental health. We do need to retrain 911 dispatchers to redirect calls, but that's going to require an infusion of resources that does not infer having to take funds away from law enforcement. I reject that as a binary choice. I think that we can meet both of those needs. The substation in Robles Junction is part of the budget for the coming year, even though the board rejected the Stone Garden funds. There was a way that was found to pay for that substation so that the western part of the county has better response time. With regard to Stone Garden funds, if the county has gotten a lot of the, did I go over my time now?
Yes.
Pardon me?
Now we're on the next question, and this is going to be a challenge.
Okay. Sorry about that.
What is, and I'm going to emphasize, the one thing that Pima County is doing that it should stop doing, and why? And what should it be doing to address that issue in a different way? One thing. And Rex, the question is to you.
You know, something that I noticed when the board was discussing the restaurant regulations, well, not just regulations for restaurants, but restaurants for operators of all public accommodations coming out of the pandemic, was that they had to go back and revise those regulations 3 or 4 times because they kept getting input after the fact from restaurant owners and other business operators. What they were proposing could not be practically implemented. And it wasn't the first time that I had noticed that the board, this is not a responsibility of staff, but the board has not done an adequate job of reaching out to people in the community to ask them if a decision is sound and can be practically implemented. I always told my staff as a school leader that I'm never going to make a decision without having a lot of discussions with the people on the ground who have to implement that decision. And I mentioned that anecdote because it's just the most recent example of the board not doing enough to reach out to the community to see if what it wants to do can be practically implemented. And again, that's the responsibility of elected leaders, not the responsibility of staff.
Time.
And Steve, what is one thing that the county should be doing, should stop be doing?
There's one fundamental underlying thing that speaks to so many of the problems that we have with the way Pima County runs. And that is that Pima County, because so much of it is unincorporated, acts as if it were a municipality. That's how it gets away with the waste, being able to funnel millions of dollars to Worldview, being able to keep hundreds of unfilled positions on the books so that it can pad its budget. It's got to stop operating as a municipality. And I touched on this earlier. The way to do that is for areas like Catalina, like Picture Rocks, like Tanque Verde, like Casas Adobes, like the foothills, to incorporate themselves. They can do so without a long-term, or potentially, if they're very careful about it, any significant tax burden. And they can then wrest power from Pima County, shrink the county government so that its budget comes down. And it's all a wash for what that ends up, or the way that ends up shuffling the dollars around. So the county very much needs to stop acting as a municipality, and that's something that we all need to do. But I want to touch on what Mr. Scott just said, because the county did make some token effort to reach out to the business community before it started to put these different regulations in place. It created an advisory committee, and the supervisors stocked that committee with folks who didn't have the business experience. So we've got to wrest some of that power from the county so that they can't do those kinds of things, so that they don't have that ability.
Okay, Steve, now we're going to take the same question and we're going to twist it just a little bit. What is one thing that Pima County is not doing that it should start?
One of the, I don't want to say low-hanging fruit, but one of the really easy targets there is getting on the road problem. Even if you live in incorporated areas like Oro Valley, like Marana, like City of Tucson, well, City of Tucson's not a great example, you still will drive onto county roads as you go between these different suburbs, and you'll see just how bad those roads are. It's only under the leadership of Supervisor Miller, who's retiring from this seat, that the county has made a concerted effort to start putting funding towards fixing the roads. I believe it is imperative that the county take the funds that it receives from the state, those gas tax funds, the vehicle license funds, and use those exclusively for fixing the roads. You talk about PAYGO. PAYGO has no teeth. PAYGO is just a budget. And by the way, what PAYGO predicted to spend on roads in just 5 years is still not what we're supposed to receive from the state in one. It's not a responsible use of the funds. PAYGO was a bad idea, especially because they wanted to do other things with it as well. We need to take the resources that we have and stop doing these pie-in-the-sky crony deals like a Worldview, and fix our roads, bring up the infrastructure so that we attract jobs, so that we attract opportunities, so that we make this a better place to live. That's what Pima County needs to start doing, and they need to start now.
And Rex, what is the one thing that Pima County is not doing today that it should begin doing?
Pima County needs to take a leadership role, not the sole role, but a leadership role in ensuring that every child in Pima County has access to quality early childhood education. We have examples around the country in conservative states like North Carolina and in liberal cities like Cincinnati, where when government takes the leadership role, school districts, other municipalities, nonprofits, come to the table with government and help to assure this. Education is the great change agent. The more education you have, the more likely you are to live a prosperous and happy life. I am married to an early childhood teacher. She can tell you within the first day of having kids in a kindergarten class which kids have had quality early childhood education and which haven't. And the ones who haven't are almost always children of poverty. There was legislation that was proposed in the Arizona legislature last year that would allow the county to use a portion of the secondary tax for the library district to help fund our portion of this. We can do this. We wouldn't be the sole person doing it. But if we don't take a leadership role, there's no other entity in the county that in the area that can do this for our kids and for our economy.
Mr. Johnson, if I may, I'd like to respond to Mr. Scott on that.
I'll give you 15 seconds.
I appreciate that. It doesn't do us any good to expand education when, as a student graduates from our college, they want to leave town. We need to ensure that we have the opportunities here. We need to ensure that we have the jobs here, that we have the quality of life that will keep them here first.
Okay. Next question, and Rex, you're number one on it. Do you have any concrete proposals for how Pima County could do high-speed internet access to all residents and organizations in the county?
No, I do not have any concrete proposals for how to assure that. There certainly is a technology gap for people in rural areas and people in low SES neighborhoods that has been accentuated by the reliance on remote learning that the pandemic has brought about. What I can tell you is that as someone who has always practiced collaborative leadership, my commitment would be to work with not just public sector entities that are concerned with this issue, but with private sector partners to find a way to ensure greater access to that level of technology for all of our residents, most especially our children. This is an issue that is not going to be solely solved by government, but it does require leadership that is capable and willing of reaching out to everybody in the community who could help us to come up with comprehensive solutions.
Steve, do you have any concrete proposals for Pima County getting involved in providing high-speed internet access?
I almost feel bad tackling this one because of my background in IT. This is very, very familiar territory. So yes, we've already got a couple of companies here, SimplyBits and DakotaPro.biz, who do wireless internet and do it very, very well, and who can cover a significant amount of the community just using wireless. But we've also got fiber rings that run around much of the metro area. The concern then becomes those more rural areas, those more outlying areas. And the best way to cover them with the technology available today is through cellular-based internet. I've been experimenting here at the house with using one of the 4G. We're not even talking 5G yet. This isn't build out for what's down the road. This is using existing technology. But I've had very good success using home internet based on a cellular modem. The county's role in that, whenever one of the cell carriers seeks permitting to put up a tower, especially to serve those outlying areas, get on it. Get it done. Make sure it's environmentally sound. Make sure it's not going to interfere with any other radio in the area. Do the normal due diligence, but get quick about it, get it approved, and let them get those towers up so that we can get service out to those individuals in the far-flung area.
Okay, the next question is going to be very specific and wants a very simplistic answer, but an explanation as to why or why not. On the board, would you support the federal Operation Stone Garden, which is the federal program to provide grants to local enforcement agencies to help with border enforcement, if it comes before the board? Would you vote yes or no? Why or why not? And Steve, it's up to you.
Thank you. City of Tucson and Pima County had accepted the Stone Garden funds for quite a number of years before all of a sudden it became an issue earlier this year. And when Sheriff Napier stood up and gave what was a very cogent explanation for why he would benefit from being able to open that new substation and use those funds to do so, it made an awful lot of sense. Absolutely, yes, I would support accepting the Stone Garden grant in the future. It's a federal grant that helps us ensure that public safety that is so crucial for our quality of life here in Pima County. Now, one of the things that I would question is, Mr. Scott brought up earlier, is, okay, if they found the money to replace the Stone Garden grant, what did they take that away from, or what waste were they able to cut to do that? Why was there buffer enough in the budget to be able to make up for accepting a grant? And why was there controversy over it to begin with if the intended use for that grant, the county's going to meet anyway? Short answer, yes, I would absolutely support Stone Garden.
Okay, Rex, your response.
Just to respond to my opponent, the money for the Robles Junction substation that is in the budget was never going to be paid for with Stone Garden funds. Stone Garden funds have been used to pay for overtime for deputies and also for millions of dollars of equipment over the years. I would think that there needs to be some middle ground on this issue. The equipment that the Sheriff's Department has purchased over more than 10 years has been of great value to the department. And I also think that we can't ignore the fact that there is transnational crime, mostly in the western part of the county, that endangers Pima County residents. Supervisor Bronson, who represents that area, proposed some amendments the last time that Stone Garden funds were up. And the sponsor of the proposal, Supervisor Christie, for some reason didn't support those amendments, and so it went down. I think there's middle ground that can be found on this issue so that we continue benefiting from the equipment and the other uses of the funds, as long as we can address the pension costs to the county that were raised and the imperative that county employees never be used to enforce federal immigration policy. I think there's middle ground that can be found on this issue. I'm committed to finding it. So this, like I-11, may be another topic where Mr. Spain and I are in agreement.
So I assume it's a yes?
Yes.
Okay. Rex, now we're still with you on the next question, and you've already touched on this a little bit. Do you advocate for quality early childhood education for our kids? If so, how specifically? And you can expand on when you talked about it earlier.
Thank you, Al. Yes, I absolutely do. There are reasons associated with brain development and kindergarten readiness in 3- and 4-year-olds that make this an imperative. And if this isn't available to every child, regardless of family income, then it's just another systemic disadvantage that is heaped on the shoulders of a poor child. In order for education to be that change agent in the life of every child, there needs to be access to it for every child. This is also going to be a benefit to our economy. Every employer wants not only for their employees to have access to a outstanding education system, pre-K through higher ed, but it also will help us to have that highly trained workforce that every employer wants. That's why organizations like the Southern Arizona Leadership Council, which is made up primarily of business leaders in our area, are some of the most strong advocates for this. Again, it is not solely the county's role to provide this, but if the county doesn't take the leadership role and then bring in other municipalities, school districts, nonprofits, the private sector, this will not move forward. It is a debt that we owe to every child, and the county has to play a leadership role. It is the only entity that can play that leadership role.
Steve, do you advocate for quality early childhood education for our children?
So I've got a problem with the fundamental premise of this question because of the wording. It wants to paint somebody who doesn't support the county paying for that as some kind of anti-education type of individual. That's absolutely not my stance. I get a little bit frustrated. Education is something that I've been passionate about for a very, very long time. If you ask a 3rd grader, 2 plus something equals 6, what's that something? They should be able to answer 4. That's one of the rudiments of algebra. And we can start teaching those concepts. As a matter of fact, teaching a concept like that helps teach that child how to learn. But we don't teach that in our public school system. I'm losing faith in the curriculum, in the way we teach, because we have over so many years diluted the curriculum and tried to come down to the lowest common denominator instead of bringing those kids up. It is not the county's responsibility to ensure that we have that early childhood education. It's the parents' responsibility to make sure that those kids get access to the library every now and again so they can check out a book and learn on their own. And I don't want to get on a box here, but there's a cultural problem in our society that we don't value that education. That needs to get fixed somehow. That's outside the scope of the Board of Supervisors, but that's a bugaboo for me.
Okay, Steve, question. How will you change the way Pima County collaborates with other jurisdictions to promote economic development?
The short answer is get efficient and effective about improving the quality of life here with the resources that we already take. Again, you look at businesses that have had opportunity to come here and have opted not to or have left because we haven't maintained our infrastructure. You look at all of these students, so many who graduate the university, who graduate Pima and find better opportunities elsewhere. Then you look at the things the county has done where it's tried to insert itself in economic stimulus. Look at how it bungled the American Airlines deal and wasted millions of our dollars on a contract the county was never a party to, it never signed. The county does not pick winners, the county picks losers. And it's time for the county to focus on those fundamentals, make this a more attractive place to be. Because as those jobs come in, as those opportunities come in, it will help raise the fundamental salaries, the fundamental pay for everybody in the area by attracting those better opportunities. That's what the county needs to do in concert with the municipalities and hopefully new municipalities that will come up and take some of that power from the county to ensure that we have the quality of life that is attractive, that people want to see when they graduate.
And Rex, how will you change the way Pima County collaborates with jurisdictions to promote economic development?
Well, there's something that I would continue, which is the county's partnership with Sun Corridor. And that partnership is not only beneficial to Pima County, it's beneficial to our entire region because Cochise and Santa Cruz counties are also part of the efforts that we undertake with Sun Corridor, which is a much more broad-based organization than its predecessor, TRIO, and has much more financial support from the private sector than TRIO did, which was primarily funded by the public sector. But I think there is an entity that we need to use more frequently within our area, and that's the Pima Association of Governments. The Pima Association of Governments oversees the Regional Transportation Authority, but it could be an extraordinary clearinghouse for collaboration, not only on economic development, but on trying to increase the stock of affordable housing throughout the county and its municipalities, on water policy, on dealing with waste, including the diminishing market for recyclables. That entity is ripe for more collaboration, and that is something that I plan to explore with all of the other municipalities that are part of the Pima Association of Governments.
Time.
And Rex, what should Pima County government itself do operationally to be more energy and water efficient?
Well, the county has had in place for the last several years a plan with the acronym SAPCO. Government always has acronyms. That's the Sustainable Action Plan for County Operations. And it is a plan that is reviewed annually in terms of reducing the county's use of paper, of electricity, of water. Because if you're going to be encouraging the private sector to be operating in more environmentally sound ways so that we can deal with the climate crisis that has been a reality for decades, then government has to show that it can keep its own house in order. I've been concerned when I've looked at the current plan that there are areas within it where we are not likely to meet all of our goals. And I would be pushing staff for answers as to why we are not meeting our goals in those areas and what we can do better to meet them. Again, it's similar to the quality early childhood question. If government does not take the lead role, who else will? And when it comes to its own operations, it's obvious that it has to keep its own house in order. So I would be a fierce watchdog of that plan and ensure that we're meeting our long-term and short-term goals within that plan.
And Steve, how would what should the county do operationally to be more energy and water efficient?
Well, one absolute quick hit is to stop purchasing all these unnecessary buildings that they try to justify. For example, a bowling alley that they bought and then decided after the fact, oh, we didn't do our due diligence. We now have asbestos remediation to do. It's problems like that where the county keeps growing instead of working on the resources it has. But there's one of the things that I've said so many times throughout this campaign is that this pandemic is opening up all kinds of opportunity for us. And I think Pima County, not the government, but those of us who live here, can lead the recovery, own the recovery, and show the rest of the country how to come back stronger by leveraging these opportunities to do things better. One of the ways to do things better for Pima County, instead of buying these new properties, is work more towards work from home. We did that. My team, even though we were on the leadership team for the Americas, was distributed throughout the country. And we all worked from home. And we're very, very successful in what we did. We didn't have issues with people slacking off. We didn't have to worry about that because we had the right people in the jobs. We had them doing their work. We were monitoring to make sure that they got done what they needed to do. It worked very, very well. And the county can start looking at that instead of expanding its physical plant and then needing to remediate after the fact.
Okay, we're down to our last question. One of you will be elected, and you will be faced with a recent issue to come up with a solution. Recently, Old Tucson was closed and returned to the county. Do you have any creative suggestions for its future use? Steve, it's your question first.
So I'm smirking a little bit because Old Tucson kind of has a special place in my heart. It was where my wife and I went on our first date back when we were dating many years ago. So I cringed. I felt bad when I saw those stories that Old Tucson had to close. And I understand the impact this pandemic has had. Yes, the county owns the facility. I would very, very much like to see some new business reopen it and expand on what they were able to do, expand on the business model to improve it and keep it a good draw, get it back to being an exciting facility, an exciting tourist destination here. That's not something that the county has the expertise to do. That's something an independent business needs to do. But boy, what a loss for our community to have Old Tucson shut down. I look forward to it coming back stronger than it was before.
Ray, or Scott, excuse me.
That's okay.
I'm reading ahead on my script.
That's all right.
Rex, what do you have any creative thoughts on what
Old Tucson is a treasured place for everybody in Pima County. But where I think it might have gone wrong was when it started to operate more like a theme park and less like a place that should celebrate this area's past in filmmaking. I think if it's going to reopen, then there should be an emphasis on the filmmaking history that happened there. And there have got to be on that site and throughout Tucson, in the archives, examples of the hundreds of movies that were filmed there. And that really should be the focus if it's reopened that way. Another thing to look at is it's in close proximity to the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum. Perhaps there could be some partnership between that facility, which is highly successful, and Old Tucson. But again, it's something where the county is going to have to reach out to both the private and the public sector so that there can be a true community-based discussion and decision about what we do with that Pima County treasure.
We've been at it for 1 hour, and it's time to wrap up, and you're each going to get your 2 minutes to give your last pitch, why people in the county should vote for you. And we're going to start with Mr. Spain. You have 2 minutes.
Well, again, my tremendous gratitude to the Sun City Oro Valley Government Affairs Committee. Thank you again for putting this event together. Thanks to everybody who's dialed in and everybody who watches down the road on YouTube. Thank you for spending your time learning more about this race. What I hope you've come to see over this past hour is a very marked difference between myself as a candidate who sees that Pima County is too big as a government, who is not afraid to call out the problems and work to address them, but who can find ways to reach across the aisle. Heck, we found two of those during our conversation today. And then contrast me with my opponent who wants to expand government, who wants to add all kinds of programs, who wants to add to the burden that makes Pima County a less desirable place for people to be. We need to welcome in those jobs and opportunities, and it's not a big burdensome government that does that. It's a thriving community with a small government with good infrastructure. We need somebody to continue the good work that's been happening from District 1 to get funding moving towards roads, to cut the budget, to get rid of the waste, to tighten up the budget so that we can accomplish these goals and do so responsibly and reasonably, especially as we confront this pandemic and need to find ways, like I've said before, to come back safely but swiftly, to be stronger than we were before. I am the candidate with that business sense, with that analytical background, who offers that to all of District 1. And I very sincerely hope that I get to earn your vote. But again, I thank you for spending your time with us today. And thank you again to the
And Rex Scott, you have your 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Al. And thanks to you for being a strong moderator. And thanks to all of our audience members. And thanks to Mr. Spain for taking part in this exchange of ideas. You know, those who seek to lead must always be worthy of public trust, but they also need to be worthy of the times in which they serve. And in this time of extraordinary challenge and crisis, of horrible sadness and loss, my commitment to the residents of District 1 is to lead us through the rest of this pandemic and the recovery from it so that Pima County can be a better place to live, to work, to learn, and to raise a family. As I mentioned before, I have spent half of my career working on behalf of families within this district, but I've also lived in this district even longer than that. My commitment to public service is surmounted only by my commitment to the well-being of this district and the people in it. I've already mentioned how I would use my background as both a voter and as a leader to represent all of the diverse views within Pima County's only purple district. But I want to close by sharing an anecdote with you. When I was the principal of the last school that I led, Tortolita Middle School, at the beginning of every year, I shared a copy of the cover letter that I submitted when I applied for the position with every member of the staff. And what I told them every year is, you deserve to know that I am always going to act and behave like the person I said I was going to be when I applied for this job, and I want you to hold me accountable for that. I hope the residents of District 1 will hold me accountable for being the kind of leader I said I would be during this campaign. Thank you very much.
We would like to thank each of you for taking the time today to help us understand your positions on key issues for Pima County. We encourage everyone to vote in the November election. If you intend to vote by early ballot, please make sure that you are on the Pima County's permanent early voting list. This is especially important if you will be out of town in early November. Once again, thank you to Steve Spain and Rex Scott.